I think the most probable, most plausible ways that we could find other life would either be finding, proof of microbial life on Mars or another planet nearby, finding convincing biosignatures in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, or finding evidence of technology, whether it's a signal or structures, across great distance.
Namaskar. Vishe Shanti. Salve
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
Jaime, thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the interview. If you could maybe just start off with just your name and what do you do?
My name is Jaime Green. I'm a freelance writer and editor, so that means that I do a lot of different things. But the most important one to me, and probably to the context of this conversation, is that I've spent the last several years writing a book called The Possibility of Life that's about how we imagine alien life in science and in science fiction.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Can you tell us when is the book coming out first?
As far as I know, the book will be coming out in April of 2023.
Okay, super. And can you tell us a little bit about it? I'm kind of excited.
Sure, thank you. Basically, with this book, I wanted to look at the question of life beyond Earth in a different way than it's usually approached. Most of the books about extraterrestrial life go into it asking whether or not. Is there life out there? Are we alone? Is it common? Is it rare? What are the odds? Is it good odds? Is it bad odds? Things like that. And what I'm trying to do is just ask a different question, which is, what if? If there is life out there, what do we think it might be like? How do we imagine using science and using science fiction? Because I do think that those two are very much in conversation with each other and are doing the same sort of project, which is trying to expand our imaginations beyond what we know on Earth. So the book just sort of approaches things that way. And, I am not a scientist. I don't have a PhD. And so I'm coming at this, I think, with a different set of questions, a different way of asking those questions and drawing in lots of different research in lots of different fields, as well as, books and movies and short stories and TV shows, and just trying to see what all of that adds up to.
Awesome. Sounds fantastic. And I think it's like, it connects with me because the first season of this show was essentially with astrobiologists, and like about halfway through those discussions, I realized like how much either astrobiologists are influenced by science fiction or how much science fiction writers like really get a lot of the science and sort of expand on that and like use their imagination to I think there's a lot of imagination as well, I think, even in astrobiology as a field. And are you looking at stuff like, what if the gravity is much heavier on another planet's life could look like this, or is it that sort of stuff?
It doesn't get into quite that much detail. I, for better or worse, decided to cover a lot in the book. So it goes from all the way at the beginning, looking at how we understand the origin of life, because if we're going to try to look for life on other planets, we need to have an understanding of how that might happen and how life as a phenomenon arises. And then I have a chapter about planets, about exoplanets. And there I get into some of the, if there was a planet like Earth, but instead of orbiting the way Earth does, it orbited on its side like Uranus does. How would that change the seasons? How would that change what it was like to live on a planet like that? I also spent some time exploring evolution, and would evolution on another planet, assuming that, life evolved and it was sort of biochemically similar and all of that, would we have reason to think that evolution would sort of parallel evolution on Earth, that, on another planet, life would solve problems in similar ways? Would you have fish-shaped things in the water and something with wings in the air? Or is that just narrow-minded of us? And would it be completely unimaginable? And then the second half of the book is looking at what we would think of as intelligent or advanced life. What is intelligent? What makes an alien a person? Another being that you could try to connect to. Technology, how do we imagine, super advanced aliens, and what does that tell us about how we imagine different futures for humanity? And then at the end, I look at different visions of making contact with aliens and, you know, what that might do to them, to us, what it might mean, how are the different ways we could go if we even could make that kind of a connection.
So, I mean, obviously, do you think we have a future off Earth as a species?
That's a really, really hard question, because I think it depends how we do with our near future on Earth. You know, like, I know this interview is going to come out a bit in the future, but the most recent climate report just came out, I think yesterday or the day before, and we have some very serious problems to face on Earth before we can hope to expand. And I think any sorts of advanced technology that we might be on the verge of discovering that might make human life off of Earth possible, it's needed on Earth first. And also, you know, people talk about terraforming Mars or whatever. It still would be a lot easier to save Earth's climate and make Earth's climate, you know, habitable and stable and pleasant than starting from scratch somewhere else. So I would love for us to have a cosmic future, but we have to prove that we can have a future here first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think somebody I'd spoken to had also said that, like, even if there was complete, almost annihilation of humans on Earth and there was only a couple of us left, it would still always be easier to start here.
I mean, you think about the amount of fuel required to get off the planet, like all of that energy, and whether we're talking about money or we're talking about some sort of post-apocalyptic situation where money doesn't exist anymore, spend that here making here okay first. And then when you've got like a surplus, then we can start thinking about other, you know, fantastic realms.
Okay, let's hypothetically think optimistic future, 1,000 years, where post scarcity economics, and it's an amazing place. Give me in your mind, what do you think it could look like?
The way I try to think about that is thinking about what was Earth like 1,000 years ago, which I'm not a historian, so I can't answer super well. But, you know, 1,000 years ago in Europe, it's medieval times. And, you know, we've got, I'm guessing, feudalism and, you know, some basic metal work. And, you know, that's the level of technology, and that's the level that society is at. And to imagine going from that to today is such a huge leap. And then you look at the acceleration of technology and advancement, and how technology begets technology and advancement begets advancement. And I'm not saying it's necessarily exponential, but I think it's really hard to imagine, but in a kind of wonderful way, because anything that I could imagine now would be so limited by what I know. You know, like, even Star Trek isn't set 1,000 years in the future. Star Trek is a few hundred years in the future. And even that is so amazing to think about, you know, being in a federation with all of these different extraterrestrial species. And of course, you know, poverty has been eliminated on Earth, and faster than light travel is possible. And we can just sort of, you know, explore the stars. But then, of course, they're also still drinking tea and wearing pants and doing those sorts of things. So, I mean, the thing that I would hope for is what you said, that it's post-scarcity, that we, look, I really hope that if we make it 1,000 years, it's because we've made some sort of real advances in terms of society, in terms of how we treat other people and what we value, and how we spend our resources and distribute our resources. I think it would be really hard for us to make it 1,000 years without doing that. But humanity also has, unfortunately, quite a knack for perpetuating inequalities and finding advancement and success for a small percentage. So, you know, there's what I hope, and then there's humanity always seems to find a way to keep making some of the same mistakes too.
My question is, do you think that there is life out in the universe? And yeah, that's the question.
I think that there is life in the universe. I think there's simple life. I think there's single cellular, sort of the equivalent of bacteria here. Simply because, as far as I know, life arose on Earth just about as soon as conditions allowed for it. And that indicates to me that it was somehow easy, that we didn't have to sit and roll the dice for 3 billion years before the first little cells emerged. So I think that there is probably lots of that kind of life. But what I don't know is if there's anything more complex than that.
So intelligent life, not...
I don't know. I mean, I want there to be. And even if we're just talking about within our galaxy, it's huge. And there are so many planets. And so even if this is where we get into the odds thing and the probabilities and everyone trying to say, well, if the probability is like this and then this probability is like this and you multiply those, then it seems like we have a good chance. And then someone else is like, well, I think we have to turn that factor down. And now it seems like there's no life in the galaxy. We don't even exist. And it's like, well, we have no idea. The Earth is so full of life. And that can either make it seem like life has a very easy time of existing and flourishing and diversifying, or it means that we happen to live on this incredibly lush inhabited planet, and I have no idea. I don't know. And anyone who says they do know is guessing.
And you wrote an article, if I can get this right, on how when people realize that the Earth is just another planet, it changes the way that they think about the world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the article I wrote was mostly about different kinds of astronomy research that look at Earth as if it were an exoplanet to see what we could see if we were somewhere else, or if someone else on another planet were trying to observe Earth and figure out, is there a planet orbiting the sun? How, are there planets orbiting this yellow star off in the distance? And if they had the sort of technology that we have, what could they tell about that planet? And part of that is a way of testing, okay, if there's another Earth out somewhere, are we capable of detecting its presence, the presence of various signals that life might be there, signals of technology being there? But I also think that there's, and people just write scientific papers about this and it influences exoplanet research. But I also think that there's a more almost emotional or not spiritual. I think there's a deeper way that thinking about Earth as a planet changes things, where this draws on the research of anthropologist Lisa Messeri, who wrote a book about how scientists imagine and understand other planets as worlds. And that's her sort of framework that, how does our understanding of another planet turn it into a world or turn it into a place that we could imagine other beings being, we could imagine future humans being there. And so I think that understanding that where we are, this place, this world that we live on is also a planet, sort of just makes it one of many instead of this special, unique place. And I think that there's something for me, that gives me that sense of connection to the cosmos that I think people are often looking for in trying to decide if they think there's life elsewhere or intelligent life. We want to be part of something bigger than just humanity, but I think that we already are. And that can just come from the understanding of our home as a planet, just like there are thousands and thousands of other planets in the galaxy.
Golden records.
Yes.
About golden records. Tell me what you know about the Golden Record, what you think about the previous Voyager Golden Record.
I think just as a project, as an idea that we're putting this message in a bottle, trying to reflect the very best of humanity, like greetings in all these languages, showing that we're unified, the sound of children's laughter, the sound of whale song, just like trying for this really idealistic, trying to be very global and all-encompassing for they tried at least. And then that we're just going to put it on a spacecraft and fling it out into space. That, like, of course, we often forget that the Voyager probes did a lot of science first. They did a lot of science before getting to the edge of the solar system. But just the idea that now these human-made objects are going to be out there forever, I think it just really captures people's imagination. It captures this sense of possibility and human accomplishment. Andrian talks about it being a boost to human self-esteem, to be able to say that we came together and we did this and we accomplished this, and we are saying to this unknown galactic community, like, we're here and we want to be a part of your community. So I think it's a very romanticized thing, and it is very romantic. And I think the people who made the record would agree. I don't think that it's, people like me over-romanticizing something scientific. I actually think that it is a very dreamy, idealistic project, and that's why I got the tattoo. I think that's why a lot of other people get the tattoo, and that's why it's got to be one of the best-known NASA projects. I assume. I don't know. It is to me.
What do you think? What do you think's a good way to do a new record?
This is a very narrow idea, but and lots of people have different criticisms or suggestions for ways the original Golden Record could just be slightly improved. I will just say that if you're going to do greetings in multiple languages, have everyone say the same thing so that it can work like a Rosetta Stone, because otherwise, as it is, the representatives of various languages who gave their greeting got to choose what they would say, which is a really interesting cultural artifact and shows different things about different cultures. But if we are actually imagining this as something that an extraterrestrial will get and hopefully decode, let's make it a little easier for them and give them, a bunch of different languages all saying the same thing so that they can, if they crack one, they can crack the rest and they can extrapolate. But more broadly, it's really hard to think about because it requires you to imagine an extraterrestrial intelligence, and not just one, but an array of them. So, like, what could we do that is most comprehensible to the most kinds of intelligences? Or how do we create redundancies? How do we create redundancies so that, if this alien doesn't have vision and this alien, doesn't have language, and this one lives underwater and this one speaks a language that is 3 different sounds at the same time, and this one's language is made out of sense. Like, how do we speak to all of them? Or, I guess when you ask me what would I put on a new Golden Record, my first question should really be, is the Golden Record for us or for them? Because there's the sort of the idea that the Golden Record, the original one, was much more for us than for whoever might find it, that doing this project says something to humanity about ourselves. This is the vision of ourselves that we want to see. But you can also say that it's more for us than for any extraterrestrial, because even let's imagine 10,000 years from now, a spaceship is going along and beep, 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 and they find this jalopy floating in space. I think the Voyager probes are about the size of a small car, right? And they find it and they're like, this looks technological. It's not ours. Let's see what it is. Oh, there's this record on it. It looks like a message. Odds are that's future humans, because we are the one technological civilization that we know exists. So in some ways, the golden record, the old one, the new one, the people most likely to find it are far future humans who maybe have totally lost connection with the culture that created the artifact. So then if we know, that's a lot easier to craft for, because we at least know the sensory faculties that we're working with.
What would you like to know from an alien? If we received a golden record, what would you like to be on that golden record from an information perspective of another civilization?
I would want to know about their language and their biology. That's what I would first want to know. I would want to, I'd be so curious how their language works. Is it just like it's another Earth language, or is it in a completely different, incomprehensible realm? Like, how does it work? And I would love to know about their biology, because I feel like as soon as we have 2 examples, then we can start understanding what the terrain is, what the options are. I mean, sure, maybe we find the most similar to us alien, but if they're humanoid, or if they seem to have characteristics that are familiar to us from other life on Earth, that would be fascinating. Or are they just completely like, what I want to know, like, what is their body plan? What is their anatomy? Especially if we're thinking, not that I can go to their world and see them and observe them, but if I'm just getting this little message in a bottle, I want to know about their anatomy and physiology and their language. For some reason, those are the things that are my highest priorities.
How do you think we could explain humanity?
I mean, in order to answer that question, I feel like I first need to know so much about who we're explaining it to. Like, how similar is the alien? What's their civilization like? Do they live on land and breathe air? Like, even just things like that, like explaining humanity to a lion versus to a dolphin feels very different, just in terms of the context. And all that I keep thinking of in all sorts of science fiction stories, we're very fond of writing stories where aliens describe humanity back to humans. This happens in Contact, where the alien that Ellie Arroway eventually meets, she says, like, oh, he says, you're a fascinating species, so much love, but also so much pain and such dreams, or something like that, or in Octavia Butler's Dawn, one of the aliens says to a human that humans are very hierarchical, and that's sort of our fatal flaw, and that all life on Earth is hierarchical, and that it's become baked into humanity, and that is our problem. And I think that we're so hungry for outside perspectives to tell us what do they see, to put us in context of other life. Are humans, do we fight more than other people fight? Are we more loving or less loving? Are we more patient, more generous? You see this in Star Trek too, that like humans become sort of the neutral default, but then you have the very logical Vulcans and the very warlike and passionate Klingons, and we're always just trying to triangulate to figure it out. And so it's so hard to know how to describe ourselves, because we don't know how we compare to anything else. Like, I could say that humans, we love art and beauty, and we love nature, and we write poetry and sing songs and make paintings. Look at all of these ways that we honor nature in our creativity. Or I could say that, human competitiveness and greed has completely broken and ruined our relationship with nature. But even that isn't about all humans. It's just about the human culture that has become dominant on most of the planet. So That's a really, really, really long way of saying that I don't know.
How do you think finding other life out there would change humanity?
I don't think it would change us very much, because odds are, I think the most probable, most plausible ways that we could find other life would either be finding, proof of microbial life on Mars or another planet nearby, finding convincing biosignatures in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, or finding evidence of technology, whether it's a signal or structures, across great distance. It's, I think, extremely unlikely that anyone we can talk to is going to show up on our doorstep, which means that we're not going to have anyone we can have a conversation with. Even if we receive a signal that's directed at us, that's opening up a communication, odds are that signal is going to be having to cover tens or hundreds of light years in each direction, back and forth. So this is not a chat. It's more like being pen pals with the first Queen Elizabeth. So what are we going to learn about the other life that we find? What new context are we going to be able to add to our understanding of humanity? Probably not that much. The most that I think we're likely to be able to learn, at least, in my lifetime, is life elsewhere exists, period. And I think that for me would be, a beautiful, expansive thing to learn. I think interest in people studying astronomy, I think astronomy programs in colleges would probably get a lot bigger. But I think it would be decades or centuries before before we sort of figure out what to do with that knowledge. But, if we find microbes on Mars, we have thought that we have found life elsewhere many times. In the 90s, there was the potential Martian microbe fossil. Earlier than that, there were hoaxes about people on the moon, or people thought they saw, canals on Mars. And if you go farther back, to soon after Copernicus and Galileo, writers and scientists in Renaissance Europe thought that there was life on other worlds. It's not like humanity has gone all our time thinking we're alone, we hope we're not alone, we're alone, we're alone. The last few hundred years in Western culture has been about becoming more and more sure that we're alone. When telescopes got to the point where we could see that the moon was a sphere and the planets were spheres and were worlds, everyone was just like, cool, so there's life on all of those, because if they're made from the same things that we're made out of, if they've got planets and they've got rocks, then they've got water and plants and, the spark of life, and there are men on the moon and men on Jupiter and men living in Saturn's rings and, 10 billion creatures in the solar system. And people still went to church, people still did their jobs, people still fought wars, people still lived their lives. And it was just as we learned more and more about the planets that we learned they were less and less likely to host life like us. And then, in the last 50 or so years, to host life at all. And we're just sort of coming out of that swing of pessimism into thinking, oh, maybe there was water on Mars. Maybe something was there. There are underground, undersea oceans on moons elsewhere in the solar system. Maybe there's something cooking in there. But, we have examples of times in the more distant past and within the last 100 or 150 years of times where someone said, I found it. I found life. And most people didn't care.
Any ideas on communication? What could be possible modes of communication from a golden record perspective?
There's this idea that math and physics will be the universal language, a starting place, common ground. But I think even on Earth, there are so many different ways to frame and understand different concepts, different notations or just different frameworks that I feel like it's either going to be easy or impossible. I feel like it's either going to be that, just like we see on Earth, some physiologies are convergent. You know, that like sharks and dolphins have the same shape to the outside of their body because it solves the problem of swimming through water, and they got there separately. I think there's a chance that intelligence and language and communication are also convergent, that we aren't just one way to solve a problem, but and I don't mean this in any sort of aggrandizing way, but that we might be the best way to solve a problem of how to be alive and intelligent and use intelligence for survival, not just, you know, other physical skills. And in that case, we have a good shot. In that case, the way to figure out communication, you know, other intelligences might have language as we know it might be sort of converged upon, might be the best way to do it. But if not, I think it's going to be completely alien. You know, Noam Chomsky said, maybe like the early 80s, he said something that like, you know, if a Martian shows up on our door, an intelligent one, not a microbe, and they don't have sort of linguistic common ground with us, we're not going to be able to learn their language the way that we would learn, you know, Spanish or Japanese. It's going to be more like learning physics. It's going to be more like something that needs to be really puzzled over and studied, that it's not just about deducing the grammar, but they're doing something totally different from grammar. And if that's the case, I don't know. So I guess then the answer, based on what I've just said, I believe, is just, you know, talk as if you're talking to an earthling who doesn't speak your language. Give them some ways to, you know, translate and understand, give some references, explain how numbers work in counting, and just sort of assume that there's some commonality. Because if there's no commonality, I have no idea where to start. So let's write the message for the best case scenario of whoever's out there who, you know, also does math and understands zero and addition and counting and whatever in the same way that we do, and, you know, uses grammar and syntax in analogous ways. There, I just solved the problem.
Do you think it's possible that we meet non-biological life? Or when I mean maybe non-biological, maybe post-biological.
Yeah. I do think it's possible that we would meet post-biological life. I mean, just for the simple reason that biology on Earth is not great at traversing interstellar space. We have short lifespans. We are vulnerable to radiation. We have a lot of our biological requirements are awkward in space, especially across great distances. And so if there was a kind of life or a kind of intelligence or a way to transport our intelligence such that we didn't have to worry about, you know, sleep and food and bodily functions and cosmic rays giving us cancer and our bones getting weak without gravity, you know, all those really simple troubles that even astronauts today have to deal with, it does seem more convenient, for sure. Do I think that something is going to supplant biology? I don't feel convinced by that. I think that visions of super advanced technology that lead us to a post-biological era are built on a lot of fear of technology and are built on a lot of idealism about technology at the same time. I mean, even just looking at, I know this isn't necessarily about the singularity in AI, but a lot of the people advocating for a post-biological future are the same people saying the singularity is coming, singularity is going to replace us. We, you know, can't envision anything beyond it. And, super advanced AI is going to eat us and turn us into batteries. But everyone who's been really vocal about that has given predictions of when the singularity is going to come. And they just keep moving the goalposts. Oh, it's going to be in 2010. Oh, it's going to be in 2025. It's like, I don't think it's going to be in 2025 anymore. So it feels based on, it just doesn't feel convincing to me yet. I don't know. So I think, if anything, it would be a sort of collaborative post-biology is what I feel more compelled by.
And I think the reason why I ask around sort of post-biological or the potential for communicating with an AI is that one idea around a new golden record is to essentially come up with an AI welcome message in some sense. Is that like, if we're going to meet something in space, it might not be biological, and then it would be good to have something that is a computer essentially communicating with another computer. But I think with anything like that, there are now also voices against that. And one of the arguments against that is essentially that, we could interact with another civilization that has banned AI or that finds creating sentience a bad idea or irresponsible. And there's a lot of that in the record. I've found out a lot of people that have sort of differing opinions. One of those things, what do you think about METI?
I think it's a very interesting project to think about, how do we announce ourselves? It feels very related to the golden record. And I know some people think that it's irresponsible because then bad guys might find us and might come steal all our water. But I think anyone advanced enough to come steal our water or steal our planet or, just come murder us because they feel like it is advanced enough to already know that we're here. Us sending a little beacon out, they're not going to go, oh, now we can take our light speed ships over and go enslave humanity. I think the bigger question around METI is on whose authority it's happening. It's basically diplomacy. It's basically representing the whole planet. But the planet isn't a unified civilization. And, of course, when we think about alien civilizations, we use that as a synonym for planet-wide populations. But it's very arguable as to whether or not even humanity is one civilization. And so, of course, even if we detected a signal or technology from an alien planet, we have no way of knowing and no reason to assume that it's representing a unified species. So then should I be hoping for a unified voice coming from Earth? I mean, it still would feel better, but also it's not like we're the most unified and cooperative species you could imagine. So if we were waiting for consensus, we would never send any messages. I think that METI is much more meaningful as an act for humans, both almost as a art project sort of way, but also as a thought experiment and test for ourselves. If we're going to send a message, what do we want to send? Do we want to send music? Do we want to send language? How do we make something translatable? It's basically a different medium for the thing that the golden record does. So I think it's, it's fraught, but I don't know. I see both sides of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we also, the representation part of the golden record is, I think, is something that we hold as a very important part or responsibility, essentially. And maybe in line with sort of how the original golden record was created, but also at the same time having the ability in today's age is to just have a lot more voices at that table, which we hope will also sort of increase that, at least the goal of being representative. Anything that you'd like to advise for aspiring young either authors, or name your fields that you'd like to inspire young people who are thinking about getting into it?
My advice is to read a lot. And if you are still in school, to study things other than writing and literature. So if you're interested in writing about science, study science. If you're interested in writing about history, study history. Read, not just examples of the kind of work you want to do, but things that can inspire that work as well. Different kinds of subject matter, different kinds of philosophy and arguments. This is largely advice that I wish I could have given myself when I was like 16, because I wish I had more of that sort of knocking around in my head, because I think it's really useful to have lots of facts and ideas to draw on and to be in conversation with.
Jaime, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. I have learned stuff as well, which is always makes these interviews fun.
Good. Thank you so much.